How's it going, everyone? Mike the Warhost here, and today we're talking about the just released 1.09 update for Wild West Exodus. Pretty sure I, like most of you, was expecting a few points tweaks, some rules adjustments here and there, and a light sprinkling of rules additions from the more recent units and posses to make their way to other units and factions in the game. What I was not expecting, however, was the major changes this update has brought, and I suspect that you, dear viewer, are in the same boat. In the interest of not creating a 6-hour-long video, we won't be comparing each individual card to its previous iteration. Rather, we'll be looking at a few specific units to better show off the rules changes that will be affecting everyone overall. Fortunately, as a Warhost, I had access to the 1.09 beta cards for a while before they were released to the rest of the world, so I've had a good amount of time to process everything already and distill the major points down for this video. So strap yourselves in, boys and girls, and let's get to it. Probably the single biggest change to the game is the across-the-board points drop. Almost every single card in the game saw about a 20% decrease in points. To show how drastic this is, let's take a look at the Dixie Resurrection Posse in 108 and 109. In the last edition, this Posse box came out to 915 points. In 109, the same Posse box is only 620 points. This may be an issue for people who picked up the game due to its low model count, but rest assured this game isn't going to bloat into a gigantic clunky mess. The game's original intention was to have a model count somewhere between that of Infinity and War Machine, and definitely less than Warhammer 40k or Age of Sigmar. This also means that just about every Posse box currently available and future releases will be ready to use in slower leagues and smaller games without needing to drop anything major from the list in order to meet the points requirements. Now let's talk about one of the major issues with most factions in Wild West Exodus up to this point. Portals. Unless either you or your opponent is playing a totemic heavy warrior nation list, the Absolute Power Posse, or a few specific Enlightened builds, using portals was a pain. Each portal needed to be created individually. Creating a portal is a special combat action, so not only could it only be done once per turn regardless of its success, but would make further combat actions that activation cost 2 action points rather than just the 1, and a single game only lasting 5 turns meant that planning to use portals was largely a waste of time for all but a handful of lists. That has all changed, fortunately, with the new portal rules in 109. And what a welcome change it is. I'll be releasing a separate rules video on the new portal mechanics in depth very soon, as I had it written and ready to go shortly before finding out the new update would significantly change how portals worked. So for now, we'll do a brief overview. In version 109, rather than generating each portal individually, a manipulate portal action will create a pair of portals at varying distances. The first portal will scatter d5 minus 1 inches with the normal scatter rules, but units with portal mastery can choose the scatter direction. The second portal will be generated 10 inches away from the first, and scatter will still have an effect. Units with portal mastery, however, will have their second portals pop up 12 inches away with no scatter. This adjustment means that portals will be useful for everyone in-game, not just a few specific builds that can put them on the table during deployment. A few other special rules got reworked as well. Rabble Rouser, for instance, not only lets you take an additional Angry Mob unit, but also makes that unit untargetable by Angry Mob units. It also allows the units to choose whether an Angry Mob unit critically passes or critically fails any mind check it needs to make, providing the unit in question is within 10 inches. This may be what's needed to start seeing more Angry Mobs on the tabletop outside of a Badlands adventure scenario. Report also got a boost in this new edition, making units with them much more valuable. A unit with Report can automatically pass a single check with a critical success if they're within 12 inches of a unit of civilians. Pair this with a unit carrying a beefy critical effect, and civilians will quickly become a must-have unit for any posses with access to Report. Undercover also got redone to be a bit less sacrificial. In 108, Undercover basically meant that any unit that came on the enemy's deployment edge was bound to be targeted by everything possible. While it worked great as a distraction, it lessened the overall effectiveness of the unit. This new version of Undercover not only allows a unit to come into play anywhere on the table, but it also makes the unit in question untargetable by any human unit farther away than 3 inches without passing a mind check first. This gives units coming onto the table in the game using Undercover a chance to actually do something before getting blasted into red mist. It's particularly powerful for units with both Undercover and portal manipulation, like Maria Torres Villa. She can come out of reserves anywhere on the table, drop a strategically placed portal behind the enemy lines, and run off to safety immediately afterwards. This change also makes the Secret Service posse much more playable than it was before. Several game-specific rules were also modified as well to tweak some of the more contentious issues from the last edition. The reserve role was changed to use only half of the boss's mind attribute rather than the full value, meaning the odds of units coming on from reserve won't be appearing very early in the game anymore. Metal and tough got a change as well. Now, if a unit is already disordered from anything else, metal won't apply and the unit will be wounded. Tough functions much like metal currently does, though instead of disordered, a unit will be stunned instead of wounded. And in 109, piercing values of -4 or higher will no longer negate these rules. This has been an issue with a number of players for a long time, and Workradle has finally addressed their concerns. We also got a new weapon quality with this update called Fatal. A weapon with Fatal will ignore the metal rule entirely, meaning a unit hit with a Fatal weapon will be wounded if they fail their grit check, presuming they don't have tough. This means that a lot of units in the game became much deadlier to certain unit types, mainly living units, while being wholly ineffective against others, mechanical or vehicle units. A pair of poison daggers, for instance, won't have much of an effect on a rolling thunder tank, but would absolutely decimate a unit of deputized sharpshooters. Rounding out the unit changes is 3 additions that will make hands units much more important to viable lists: Combined Fire, Massed Fire, and Massed Melee. Combined Fire will allow specific models in a hands unit to skip their aim check in order to bump up either the shooting model's aim value by 1 or reduce the piercing value of a weapon by 1 for that specific shoot action. For example, a player controlling a unit of 4 veteran rangers can have 2 models skip shooting to either increase the aim value from 5 to 7 for the remaining 4 shots coming from their chase pistols, or bring the piercing value down from -1 to -3 for those 4 shots. Massed Fire, on the other hand, will allow models in a hands unit to skip their aim checks in favor of adding their weapon's ROA to a single model. So in our previous example, the unit of 4 veteran rangers using Massed Fire will have 1 model shooting with a rate of attack of 8. This will only work for units with the same weapon, so no using a large group of hands models to boost the ROA for something like a Gatling cannon, and can't be combined with Combined Fire. It's only one or the other. Where Massed Fire really shines, however, is when targeting units with Quicken the Dead. Let's say our veteran rangers are shooting at Jesse James, who uses Quicken the Dead against the Massed Fire of the Lawman. If Jesse passes, then the number of shots coming at him gets reduced by Jesse's quick value rather than ignoring the entire action. So in our example, the total number of shots coming into Jesse will drop from 8 to 2. Massed Melee works in the same way as Massed Fire, but with melee weapons. These options will be good if your hands unit isn't fully able to bring its weapons to bear due to some of the models being stuck behind cover so they can't draw line of sight to the target, or if you weren't able to get all of them within melee weapons range of a charge. Finally, we come to the posses. No major sweeping changes here, but a few welcome tweaks. The biggest change is that nearly every legendary boss got a separate posse. Sorry, Walk's looking. With a separate posse bonus. A handful of the smaller and more restrictive posses, like Ranger Showboat, got a couple of slot changes allowing them to take up to 2 units per slot, making it easier to build larger posses. That will just about cover the major changes coming in 109. Stay tuned as I go back and redo all the tactics videos I've done thus far to adjust for the new rules along with all of my usual content. Take care, everyone. Oh, and Jesse James is now tainted because reasons.